Rhyme of the Times 2022 Review of the Year, Part 3, People and Events, Act 3. The Queen passed away. The royal baton is passed. Charles passes muster. Harry and Meghan pass up the chance to reconcile with Wills and Kate, who pass time in the Caribbean. Hussey regrets what passed her lips. Andrew passes the buck. We wait to see what comes to pass. The trials of Prince Andrew continue through the first part of 2022. Accuser Virginia Giuffre got her way when the case to dismiss her case in the USA was thrown out of a court because the judge said Giuffre's and Epstein's immunity deal was dead. Andrew's lawyers didn't manage to convince the judge that the deal also applied to the prince. So Andrew was summoned to go to court in a civil abuse case that Giuffre brought. She claimed that Jeffrey Epstein gave her to the prince to give him sexual favours. Andrew's lawyers then said his accuser may suffer from false memories that confuse her. To stop the family image being tarred, the royals came down on Andrew very hard. The black sheep shorn of all his titles and told to stay out of sight until the court case was over and done, when the Queen hoped they'd clear her son. But with that Prince Andrew's prints all over the case and damage limitation all over the place, the Queen's son finally accepted he was caught, so paid off his accuser of sexual assault. He didn't admit guilt, but a big payoff translates to Miss Giuffre, take a day off. And for the royal family, things could get worse if the hush money came from the public purse. In 2023, there could be potential trouble when Virginia's gagging order comes to an end. And in April, Andy got a further rebuke from York, which no longer wants him as Duke. The Queen thought the sun shone out of her son's bum. She surely now wished to kick the bum of her son. From a son who'd become a travesty to a grandson upsetting Her Majesty, Harry demanded a judicial review for the High Court to look into why he can't have protection in the UK, even though he said he's willing to pay. The Home Office said they have no obligation to protect his family when in this nation. Harry's response was to say, if that's the way, he will not feel safe coming to the UK. So if Mum wants to see her new granddaughter, she'd be the one to cross the water. And then, if that was not enough, Charles Charity was probed about some bad stuff. The Met was to see if the Prince's Foundation offered a Queen's Honour for a donation. And a British passport, was that any factor in persuading a Saudi to be a benefactor? Charles said that he was completely unaware. This was the Foundation's trustees' affair. In late February, the Queen had corona. In the week, Boris effectively said COVID is over. She recovered well, the virus was fleeting, and soon she was chatting in a Zoom meeting. Tough and resilient, we watched with admiration. Shame her boys were causing her such aggravation. In March, William and Kate's tour of the Caribbean gave the two royals an opportunity of being the new young face of the British royalty and to test the level of local loyalty. Republican protests in places were seen. Barbados had recently ditched the Queen. This trip was to the Bahamas, Jamaica and Belize. Protests apart, many people were pleased. Two famous people visiting made them feel proud, and the welcomes were generally joyful and loud. But William and Kate don't wish to be cast in the same light as royalty from the past. So William addressed the elephant on the tour, whether the royal family is relevant anymore. In Jamaica at the end of the 3-day trip, he presented a new kind of relationship, colonial overtones, patronisation, to be replaced by a grown-up conversation. He stopped short of giving an apology for slavery in the former colonies. Some wanted to hear sorry, many didn't care. This talk caused mixed feelings everywhere. William expressed sorrow and perhaps realism about Britain's history of imperialism. When talking of the country's future ahead, republicanism is up to the people, he said. The Queen on the 10th of May had a duty to fulfil, but mobility issues meant she was too ill. But the availability of Charlie meant she could miss the opening of Parliament. So instead, the incapacitated Queen sent her son and grandson to be the front and centre. Prince William listened as his dad read out the Queen's speech and then what this Parliament's about. There were more bills than a Dux Convention, but the Northern Ireland Protocol got no mention. In the Queen's birthday honours list, one name that appeared and could not be missed, the heroic and amazing Deborah James. At 40 joined the list of new dames. Her podcast, You, Me and the Big C, brought cancer patients hope and tranquility. 6 weeks later, her personal battle was done. After six years of fighting, the cancer had won. But Dame Deborah James had struck such a chord that bowel cancer checks had already soared. To commemorate 70 years as head of our nation, the Queen had 4 days of celebrations. On June the 2nd, they began with a live TV broadcast of Trooping the Colour and a special flypast. In the evening, with the Queen's light touch of the hand, 1,500 beacons were lit across the land. On Friday, there was Thanksgiving at St Paul's, leading on to a lunch at London's Guildhall. The Queen missed that and was also absent on Saturday for 2 other major events. The evening's Palace concert with big names there began with the Queen chatting with Paddington Bear. That was recorded. Then a live show was seen with star acts ranging from Diana Ross to Queen. Prince Anne replaced her mum at Epsom Downs, where the Derby winner aptly was Desert Crown. Since 1952, the Queen's guided our nation, and on Sunday there was more jubilation. The celebrations of Her Majesty's reign were not dampened by a sprinkling of rain. It was the last of 4 royal joyful days, street parties creating a nostalgic haze, and down Pall Mall an animated parade displaying every facet of 7 decades. On the palace balcony, a symbolic scene, a vision of life in Britain post-Queen. George, William and Charlie all there, and Edward, Andrew and Harry nowhere. And near the middle, of course, there was Liz, and the crowd lauded her like she was showbiz. And then the masses sang the national anthem, and the old lady in green waved to thank them. For 4 days Britain smiled and showed no malice towards the occupants of Buckingham Palace, just hardcore Republicans not clapping ma'am to congratulate her on her platinum. Contrast the previous Friday with the boos and catcalls that Boris had received at London's Guildhall. Of course, these celebrations turned out bittersweet. The final show to make the Queen's life complete. The big finale to close the last chapter, and how the country had cheered her and clapped her. It was just over 3 months later that she finally met her royal maker. And that maker must have thrown away the mould. Such a woman we will never again behold. And amidst these days, so sad and surreal, Was this a sign of family rifts being healed? 2 days after she died, for the first time in 2 years, Harry, Meghan, William, Kate accepting the cheers. At Windsor as they went on a walkabout, conversing it seems. But what did they talk about? Sadly though, by the end of the year the rift became even more clear. 6 Netflix interviews caused such a storm. Like the Beatles, this Fab Four will never reform. Charles has been king for barely 3 months. It was odd seeing him on TV at Christmas lunch. After 70 years of prep, he seems ready, sensitive, compassionate, humble and steady. He may feel for the meek and want to reign for the poor, but so far for his reign, it never rains but it pours. The 5th Netflix series of The Crown elicited a collective royal household frown, and many other critics were also dismayed. Complete and utter rubbish, Tony Blair conveyed. And then came the case of Susan Hussey. The lady in waiting became over fussy about from where a black woman originated. Conversational niceties had soon escalated to the question, where are you really from? Developed with the nuance of a nuclear bomb. Ngozi Fulani from the Sister Space Charity didn't feel she needed to give further clarity. She'd said she was British, no more, no less. Hussey resigned to save further distress. Later she met Fulani to show no malice was meant by the words they'd exchanged at the palace. And twice the king has faced egg on his face, with people invading his crowded space, eggs being lobbed at him when on walkabout. What the king hell is that all about? He hasn't actually been hit in the face, and both times he reacted with humour and grace. And now the firm are getting plenty of stick from 6 hours of interviews on Netflix. The establishment tends to quickly recoil when Meghan and Harry start to talk royal. But if the personalities are stripped away and we just look at the words they say, whether H&M you're against or for, there are some words said that should not be ignored. And of course everyone had their 2 penneth. In terms of hatred, Clarkson reached the zenith. In a Sun column in December he fulminated. He wanted Meghan Markle humiliated. Paraded naked through the streets, he proclaimed. Excrement thrown at her while the crowd shout shame. All people of his age agree, he claimed. Shame on you, Jezza, not in my name. And soon Harry's new book will be on sale everywhere, and Clarkson again will no doubt again go spare.